Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Joree Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Joree is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Joree.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm going to continue the discussion I started in my last episode, which was the foundation of mindfulness being rooted in Buddhist meditation practice, and how careful I've had to be over the years, especially having gotten my start teaching mindfulness in classrooms, to use very secular language and have a very secular approach, because without greater knowledge or awareness, it can easily be perceived, and by some it is still assumed, that Buddhism is a religion. And there's sometimes fear that this can get in the way of your own religious beliefs. But when we unpack this a little bit further and really understand that Buddhism is a way of life, it's a way of being, it's a framework, it's a set of tools, it's a mindset around how do we reduce our suffering. And as I explained in the last episode, that the Buddha really discovered our suffering increases when we are out of the present moment. And which is why mindfulness is the core set of practices and tools to be able to get us present, to increase awareness when we've wandered to the past, where we get stuck in rumination, to notice and have awareness of when we wander to the future, when we get into all those unknowns and the fears and the what ifs, and how to be able to really sit with what is. And in fact, there's a phrase in mindfulness that says it's this, just this. And that's not to say that whatever this is not powerful, is not impactful, but by saying it as it's just this, allows us a way to observe it in which we're not so caught up in the middle of it. And through all the tools that I teach and all of the framework that I operate from, this is a really helpful tool in understanding how can we begin to not take so personally. How can we begin to increase awareness and have that observation, have that ability for that beginner's mind, like I've talked about, to be able to see things as they are. And like I mentioned in the last episode, this is one of the foundational tools of acceptance. And just to reiterate, to accept what is doesn't mean you have to like it. But not liking it, not accepting it, doesn't make it go away. In fact, that resistance actually increases the negativity, the resistance increases our struggle and ultimately our suffering, because the more we fight what is, the bigger it becomes. The more we can accept what is, the better ability we have to be able to be present and practice the tools of responding versus reacting to it. Because that reaction is going to be unskillful. It's going to be rooted in fears or anxieties. Reactions are rooted in old patterns or old habits that maybe were established at a different time in your life when the same, things that are happening in the present moment aren't applying, but when you're triggered, you're going to draw upon those old patterns. So when we can really, truly practice being present, then ultimately we reduce our suffering. And again, a really important thing I want to highlight from our last episode is that idea of even ruminating on the positive from the past can still increase suffering of the present moment. And one of the ways I like to explain this is think about your relationship. If you're in a long-term relationship, if we use the beginning of the relationship when our hormones are raging, we're getting a huge dopamine dump, and things are brand new, they're novel, they are exciting, the newness is increasing amount of sex drive or intimacy, your ability to focus only on the good. So if you, in your present moment, however you've been long to your relationship, if you ruminated on the positive past and use that as a baseline for how everything should be today, well, you're going to likely be unhappy in your present relationship, because even if it's still awesome, even if there's still great connection and intimacy, and even if you're still excited with your partner and there's no drama or trauma or fighting, if you're comparing it from the very beginning to the now, well, it's never going to be the way it was, right? Because the most constant thing is change. So if we're comparing to something really positive from the past to the present, it's going to make us feel unhappy about the present, even if the present is great. So I just like this example that even ruminating on the positive past can still cause suffering in the present moment. That's not to say we can't remember the past. We just don't want to dwell there. It's when our mind dwells in the past or the future that's taken us out of the present moment. I want to add one more thing about this whole idea of our mind wandering. And I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but neuroscientists say our minds wander at least 47% of the time. Now, I actually think it's going to be higher than that because I think digital distractions cause more mind wandering. However, that part aside, when I was married, my ex-husband is a civil engineer, and part of what his job is to plan. And in order to plan, you have to prepare for the future. So when I was beginning my own mindfulness practice and teaching mindfulness, he would really challenge this idea of not letting the mind go to the future. And he would say to me, well, how can you plan for the future if you're only supposed to be in the present? And knowing how his mind worked and what he did for his career, it was a totally valid question. And I really understood where he was coming from and why he was challenging this idea that focusing on the future is a bad thing. Well, let me tell you, I like to plan things as well. I'm always looking for what's the next vacation, what am I doing this weekend, when is the next time I get to see a particular girlfriend or maybe have a getaway with my kids. So the future is great. And planning for it is necessary, especially when it comes to logistics like paying your bills or writing a will or a trust or figuring out how long till your mortgage is paid off or what college you're going to try to send your kids to and what do you have to do to prepare for that. So I don't want to have you think that I'm saying planning or having thought in the future is a negative. It only becomes a negative when staying so focused on the future is taking you out of what's happening right now. If you are so focused on saving for money for retirement that you're working so hard that you only are trying to hit a certain number to be able to tuck away for retirement, that maybe it's taking time away from you being with your family now. Or maybe if you're working, so hard towards planning for college, you haven't taught your child how to be happy or how to create balance in their life in the present moment. So I just want to qualify by saying, I'm not saying focusing on the future is negative. It's when your mind dwells in the future in a way that is unable to allow you to be present. That's when it becomes a problem. And the challenge becomes we have such a habit of this mind wandering, we're not even always aware of it. So to me, it always comes back down to awareness. So it's increasing our awareness of when we're stuck in the past, when we're stuck in the future, having self-compassion for that's a habit, and how to bring it back into the present moment, even if the present moment is difficult. Because breathing through the present moment is the only way to get through it. We can't have this bypass of getting out of the present by just not dwelling there, because it will catch up with us. So I wanted to just highlight those things from last episode before going on. And two other things I want to mention today. Some more of this, fundamentals of Buddhist meditation practice that is really necessary in understanding how my mind works as I begin to practice and cultivate and integrate these tools into my daily life. We talked about non-attachment and that example I gave of my story with the monks making the sand mandala and then destroying it as an example of impermanence, that the most constant thing is change. The more we hold on to something, the more attached we become, the harder it is for us in the present when it does change. So, and the extension of this is two things. One is, how are we approaching what we're doing? We so often are so quick to label things as good or bad. And the practice that is an intention to be able to highlight getting out of this habit of that quick to label good or bad is the practice of equanimity. And this is one of the hardest things to do. Well, I guess all these are hard. If it were easy, we wouldn't be practicing. Equanimity is having an evenness of mind. It's not having an instant judgment or label of something as good or bad. Because when we label something as bad, what we are automatically doing is we have a resistance to the negative. It's hard to accept. We want to not have to engage in what's difficult. And conversely, we have a striving or a clinging to the positive. So we want more of something that's good and less of something that's bad. Now, on an everyday basis, it's obvious. Of course, we don't want the good, and of course we want, or I said that backwards. On an everyday basis, of course we don't want the bad, and of course that we would want the good. See, look how easily my mind can get mixed up in how we name things. So on an everyday basis, of course this makes sense. We want to resist the negative and we want more of the positive. But life is going to throw us whatever it's going to throw us. So really, it's a matter of how are we responding to what's arising, because how we are labeling it or responding to it is going to impact our experience of it. So another way I like describing this practice of equanimity is one of the tools I would use when working in classrooms. I would have the kids close their eyes and I would ask them to put their thumb either pointing up like a thumbs up or pointing down as a thumbs down or somewhere in the middle. And I would ask the question, how are you doing right now? And they'd close their eyes and everyone would put their thumb up. And then I'd have them open their eyes and look around. And I did this a practice for a few reasons. One is I wanted to highlight and demonstrate equanimity, that we could easily say, oh, I'm doing good, oh, I'm doing bad. And with that label comes different assumptions and judgments and ways that we're going to react to those labels. But by taking away the word or the label and just having it be a representation of where we are at in the moment is a gentler way to not only name but experience our emotions. And I would also point out that look around at everyone's thumbs. You wouldn't have been able to look at them and guess where their thumb would land just by looking at them. So we need to often have different ways to be able to share our experience. And for those who had their thumbs pointed up, I would let them know that's great. And it may not stay pointing up forever. That if I were to ask you again in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or at the end of the day, your thumb is likely not going to always be in the same position. And for those who had their hands in a thumb down position, well, I would remind them that the only place it could go is up. All of these emotions, all of our experiences are impermanent. And any place that your thumb landed, whether it was straight pointing up, all the way down, or anywhere in between, was perfectly okay because that's where you were in that moment. This is equanimity. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is. And I know I keep reiterating this, but it's just such a powerful concept to begin to practice. It's a deep demonstration of radical acceptance. And when we can have radical acceptance, we begin to operate from our heart center. We begin to operate from a place of self-compassion, from a place of acceptance, from a place of mindfulness, and from a place of really deep understanding that all of our emotions are natural. All of our experiences in life are part of the human experience. And when we can extend that compassion to ourselves and others, then we have not only deeper understanding of the human experience, deeper understanding of ourselves, but the opportunity for deeper connectivity with those around us. Another way that I like to practice equanimity is this idea of saying, have a day. And, even just to say to someone, have a good day, is an assumption that a, quote, good day, number one, might be defined the same way as how I would define good as how you would define good. But it also implies a negative bias towards what if it's a bad day? And so it's something that I will often joke when I'm leading meditation classes. As people will leave, I'll say, have a day. And that's an equanimity response to allow whatever is arising to exist without judgment. If your day's good, great. If it's bad, great. All of it just is. In fact, I had a client a while back that I would tell her this every single time she would leave my office. Have a day. And it was always a nice little, fun, lighthearted way to end what could otherwise be a really heavy session. And right in the midst of when I was working with her, I was in Lake Tahoe for the weekend on vacation. And I was at a small little restaurant, and these two guys walked into the restaurant, and one of them had a shirt one of them had a shirt, and on the front of the shirt, it just said, "Have a day." And I was so excited to see this t-shirt. I literally jumped up out of my chair, and I was kind of tucked in behind the table adjacent to a wall. I jumped up out of my chair and I literally almost knocked over another chair as I intercepted these two guys on the way to being escorted to their table. I mean, I'm sure I looked ridiculous. And all I said to him was, "Oh my God, I need a picture of your shirt." And I was so excited to see the "have a day." I didn't even say, "Excuse me," and explain myself. I just kind of jumped right in. And I said, "Thank you." And then I sat back down. And then I started to laugh like, oh my gosh, I must have looked like a complete idiot. I just knocked over a chair, ran up to a guy, told him I needed to take a picture of his shirt, and then sat back down. So I was super embarrassed. So then I actually got up again and I went back to these two guys. They were now at this point sitting at their table. And I then had to explain myself, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to just stop you dead in your tracks, but I'm a mindfulness and meditation teacher, and I say have a day all the time, and oh my God, I love your shirt. I need to take a picture to send my client, so thank you so much." They got a laugh out of it. They didn't take it too seriously, and they appreciated that I came back to explain myself. And I spent the rest of my meal totally embarrassed. And at the end of the meal, I got up to go walk up to the front counter and pay. And my boyfriend was lingering a little bit behind. And unbeknownst to me, he continued to make light of my situation, of how I just, made a fuss in the restaurant. And as he walked past them as he was leaving, he said, "I'm really sorry. I have to apologize for my girlfriend. She did not take her meds this morning." And I could actually hear them laughing from the front of the restaurant. So became the butt of a joke for quite a while. But that's how excited I was to see a shirt that said, "Have a day." So anyhow, I give these examples of different ways to bring equanimity into your daily life, and just to show the deep foundation that these Buddhist tools have and how we can execute them from something very deep or something much more lighthearted. But it really is the way we respond to it. I often think if we told babies when they were born, life is going to be hard, so expect that. And you're going to have moments of ease and moments of pain, and all of it's normal. I just think we would set ourselves up for a much more realistic expectation of our life, because we tend to get so down on ourselves when it's hard, and we tend to get so stuck when we're in pain, and we think something is wrong with us for not being able to get through it, when in fact we're human. And we're just searching for the tools to get through it, which is, again, I keep saying this, but it's why I love the practice of mindfulness so much, because it provides us a framework of tools. And it's not always easy to access them, but I keep coming back to this idea that if I hold the space that the possibility exists for me to access these tools, just knowing that they exist is what gives me the ability to stay grounded, to say, okay, I may not be perfect at accessing them. I may not always be able to access them, but I know it's possible because they exist. So one of the last things that I want to be able to share as far as a foundational tool in Buddhist practice is this idea that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And that's, connected right back to that first noble truth that I talked about last time, that suffering exists, that pain in our lives is going to exist. And yet the suffering is optional piece. What that really means is if we can accept that pain exists and we cannot take it so personally, and we can step into this idea that it's part of the human experience, our suffering, our depth of suffering, the ability to which we allow that pain to take over or define us or impact us in other ways in our life, that part actually is up to us. So while pain's going to exist as part of the human experience, how much we suffer, that's where we have some choice. And that's, again, all the practices in mindfulness and meditation and these foundational tools that I'm talking about today, that's where it gets impacted. And there's another notion that is the extension of this pain is inevitable and suffering is optional. And it's this idea of the first dart and the second dart. And you know me, I love visuals. I think they're super helpful in helping us understand concepts. So the first dart, that's what life throws us. That's the shit that happens that is out of our control. That's just, again, part of life. That's the initial, whether it's you're stuck at traffic, whether your car broke down, whether you're dealing with cancer, whether you're, struggling with difficult people in your life. That's the initial pain. The second dart. This is the part where the second dart is what we continue to throw at ourselves. And I often say there are multiple second darts. It's not going to be just one. So the second dart is when we start being in resistance, when we start having our reactions, when we start our judgments, when we start spiraling into negativity. The second dart is when we say, why me? Why this? What did I do? Why is this always happening to me? Why am I the victim? So maybe it's those judgments on ourselves. The second dart is when we stay stuck. The second dart is when we act out in whether it's, acting out in anger or acting out in negativity or in resistance. That second dart could be continuing to perpetuate the problem. So pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. The first dart in life is just going to happen. The second dart, we can have control over how many second darts we continue throwing at ourselves. So when we can have the awareness that, oh, wow, I'm throwing a lot of darts at myself. I'm beating myself up here, or I'm punishing the people around me, or I'm acting out in a way that's really unskillful. It's that awareness in which we can come back into our intention, back into our practice, using our breath as that tool. And without that awareness, we might just continue to throw those second darts and therefore increasing the length and the duration and the intensity of our suffering. So I hope that these were some helpful tools for you to begin to see how just important these foundational tools in Buddhism and in mindfulness really are, and how we can take these really beautiful practices and look for the ways to bring them into our own lives. One of the things that I say constantly to my clients when I'm leading a workshop, when I'm teaching meditation, all of this is easier said than done. And I don't negate that. It is all easier said than done. But without the framework, without the mindset, without the knowledge of these tools and what they're rooted in and what it means to practice from a day-to-day moment to moment in our lives, then we just stay stuck, and then we just stay lost, and then we stay unhappy. And I just want to be here to remind you that happiness exists. The possibility for peace in your mind, in your body, in your life exists. And so to be able to have awareness of where you're stuck, awareness with that deep self-compassion, which we're going to talk a lot more about. But without that awareness, we just keep perpetuating those second darts. We keep perpetuating our suffering. We keep resisting the negative and attaching to the positive in a way that's taking us out of the present moment. So I encourage you, and however you are cultivating intentional practice, whether it be through journaling or through meditation, begin to be really curious. What are your second darts? How are you extending your own suffering? And as you look at these things, be really careful not to judge yourself for it, but to really come into some compassion and say, wow, this has been really hard. Up till now, these are the only tools I've been known how to access. And let me begin to practice with something new. So I hope that you found this helpful, and tune in next time. I look forward to sharing more with you. Bye-bye.
To continue your journey forward, find Joree Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat, visit her at joreerose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.